20 years ago, this October, OJ Simpson became free. I've been asking my guests every week their thoughts, where they were, what they were doing, and what the prosecution did wrong or what the defense attorneys did right. When you look back to 1995, 20 years ago, with the OJ Simpson case and OJ acquitted, what are some of the things that come to mind?
I remember when that verdict came in, I was in my law office with a bunch of other lawyers, and we were all listening to a radio as the verdict was being read. And I was very surprised at that. And he just told me, I was surprised because to me the evidence was overwhelming. To believe that there was this fantastic frame job against O.J. Simpson, plus he was running away. Remember, he was in that car with that guy Cowlings, and he was trying to escape.
Yes.
And the bloody gloves. Of course, he should have been charged. Who, Cowling? You mean the guy that helped?
Yeah, the guy driving the car.
Well, it depends on what he knew.
I was in junior high at that time. So would that be called aiding and abetting?
It could
Was he doing that?
It could be, unless he was forced to do it by Simpson. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
If Simpson says, "I got a gun, you better evade these police," unless Cowling on his own was trying to escape. But he could have been charged with a crime. That's true. That's possible. And then to say that, they call all these experts to testify that the shoes, like the shoes that supposedly were worn during the event, were the same, were a Bruno Magli shoe. They were able to tell that because it was, I think, a print in blood. Well, first his lawyers try to say, well, he didn't even ever own a Bruno Magli shoe. But then they had photographs predating the murder of O.J. Simpson wearing Bruno Magli shoes, right? Then they try to say that this was fabricated. So, it's obvious to lawyers, or many lawyers watching this case, that O.J. Simpson was another sociopath that was guilty. Let me tell you, I'm a defense attorney. I defend people every day. But if you're asking my personal opinion as a citizen and as a person that's not involved in that criminal case, but as a criminal defense attorney, my opinion is that the evidence against him was overwhelming in the extreme. And why was he found not guilty? Because of the great distrust that African Americans have, justifiably, in the criminal justice system. And all these elements intersected in the O.J. Simpson
and
case.
it only took 6 hours, I think, and they reached their verdict. Now, let me ask you about the prosecution. Marsha Clark and they had, of course, that detective that lied.
Furman. Mark Furman.
Right. Yeah. And we had the other guy who made him try on the glove in open court, which was a mistake. I've been told trying on a glove in front of the jury when that glove, when he pretended like the glove couldn't fit, and then he could have did that outside the presence of the jury. So says Alan Dershowitz, who was part of that team back 20 years ago. What do you think of them trying on the glove right in open court as opposed to outside the presence of the jury?
Well, first of all, I think Dershowitz is wrong about that. Why should the defendant participate in some type of experimentation, outside the presence of a jury? He doesn't have to participate in that.
He was saying,
right?
instead of live, instead of doing it in front of the jury and risking it, that way, this way,
Yeah, but I know what he's saying. He's saying instead of taking a chance in front of a jury and asking O.J. Simpson to put on the glove, and then O.J. Simpson said it doesn't fit, that Dershowitz is saying, well, they should have done this outside of the jury and told O.J. Simpson, here, let's see if this glove fits. So why should O.J. Simpson go along with that? O.J. Simpson could have said, no, I'm not putting those gloves on. If you want to ask me to put the gloves on, do it in front of the jury. Right? So I don't know where Dershowitz is coming up with this idea that, he could start getting the defendant to engage in the, experimentation during the trial outside the presence of the jury. I don't know where that's coming from. But it was a mistake for the prosecutor to say, here, try these gloves on, precisely because O.J. Simpson could turn around and say it doesn't fit. Although, from my point of view, what's the difference if they fit or they didn't fit? He was able to put his hands in those gloves enough. And on top of that, he had plastic gloves. He had latex gloves. He was wearing before he put his hands in those gloves. So,
what was your opinion of? I was going to say, what was your opinion of? Why don't you finish your point about the gloves, and then I'll ask you.
He was wearing latex when he had put his hands in the glove in the courtroom. He was wearing latex gloves, right?
Right.
To protect himself from anything that might be in that glove, or contamination or whatever. I'm certain that made your hand a little tighter also. But what's the difference, as I said, whether or not the gloves were tight or not tight? This alleged glove was used for murder, and besides, I believe his blood was found in those gloves. So, but of course, he said there were frames. He had a bunch of cops that had taken blood and dipping blood and fooling around with photographs. And I'm sorry, I've been around 34 years. I don't buy that.
Not in the slightest, right? What about the defense? Well, let me ask you about F. Lee Bailey and Johnny Cochran. What do you think of those two? Of course, Johnny Cochran.
Yeah. F. Lee Bailey, by the way, is an absolute. First of all, he ended up ultimately being disbarred, as I recall.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
He was disbarred in Florida. He supposedly engaged in some questionable activities, and he's an absolute, has a gigantic ego. I don't know him, and I don't know, and I've never met Johnny Cochran, but Johnny Cochran, at least in this case, from a defense point of view, he obviously played all his cards right. And, that failed experiment with the gloves, Johnny Cochran jumped on it. Although I don't know who legitimately would buy that argument. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. To me, that almost sounds, ridiculous, but they bought it.
Yeah.
Hey, you take your hats off to the winners in this world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, if this case was done now and all the forensics was done now with everything they have now, do you think he would have been acquitted?
I don't think so. You're right. The forensics are a lot more advanced now than they were at the time. And instead of, if you're relying on, forensic evidence, and you have all the great experts come in and testify to that, then you have greatly improved the odds that you're going to be successful at the trial, right? And forensics and DNA and fingerprint analysis, forensics and photographic analysis, all this is improved at an incredible geometric rate. And he would have been up against a much more formidable opponent today than he would have 20 years ago. So I think the end result may have been much different today.
What about the judge, Judge Ito? What is your take on him?
Judge Ito became caught up in the whole fame thing. It's amazing. People who were not exposed to the public domain to any significant degree. Nobody ever heard of Judge Ito. I mean, he was a judge over there in California.
Right.
But suddenly his name was in the paper all the time.
On Saturday Night Live.
Right. The dancing Itos.
Right.
And, yeah. And it's incredible what fame and notoriety does to people. It turns them into little gods almost, or at least they think they're gods. And suddenly they get carried away with themselves. Suddenly they become drunk almost with the excitement of notoriety and power and fame. Changes people. He was a mediocre judge. That's all he was. He was a mediocre judge before. He was a mediocre judge during that trial. And he was a mediocre judge afterwards. He had his 15 minutes of fame. That's it.
That trial was longer than 15 minutes. I'll tell you, it was like, 9 months?
Yeah, he had 15 months of fame, but who cares about Judge Ito today, except as an asterisk?
Absolutely.
Mm.
We're also on another